Hello, welcome. How's your day been so far? Good, bad, in the middle? Is it there for that last seminar? Good, bad, good, excellent. I've given this title seminar question about letting the young people take over, and if you read the bump beforehand, it started off with this classic line that says young people are the future of the church. And it can riles me every time, because how long do they have to wait in the church before they are the church? And maybe our church starts with them before they're born and keeps going until after they're dead. And it's this thing about, where do our young people fit into our churches? Are they to sit there and behave long enough until they're useful? Or actually, come on in, actually are they part of the church and therefore part of the gifts and all of those different aspects of the church and what God calls people to? He doesn't call adults, he calls people to. Whereas, a few more are going to regret moving that. Or are they now here to be involved in the ministry of Christ? Okay, that's my starting question. Let me pray for us. I'll introduce myself and then we'll kind of launch into this. So God, I pray for this next hour we've got in this day, Lord, that you will speak to us by your Holy Spirit in different ways, in ways that are right for us and our ministries and the young people that we serve. God, lead us, speak to us, and let us thrive in your presence. Amen. So, I might come back to this in a moment. We're asking the question, what do young leaders need at the start of their journey into leadership? And come on in, help me sit. And it's interesting to see the ones that come the biggest are the ones that a few of us have said, and the ones that are smaller are the ones that you can't read at the back. So I'll read some of these out. So the big ones, obviously, patience, humility, prayer habit, assuming ridiculing, safety, dangers, love, dangers, we'll come to that, it's a good point. Grace, to learn. I wonder if some of these are kind of split a sentence into lots of different points, perhaps. To listen, not be afraid to let go. There's another one about allegations, good, glad you're picking these up already. Integrity, knowledge, learning. Good. So we're thinking about this, but who am I, first of all? So my name's Robin Smith, as you'll have seen for the programme. I am a Director of Studies at CYM, which is the Institute for Children, Youth and Mission. We are a higher education college that teach children's ministry, youth ministry, chaplaincy and community ministry, based in Nottingham, although our students come from all over the place. Sheffield. Jumping ahead of and my passion, it comes from my background of being a young person, being a young leader, being a youth minister in a local church and then moving into education. And gradually my understanding of what people were doing to me when I was a young person has increased and grown in that. That's kind of what I want us to reflect on a little bit today. So, one of the metaphors that's often used, so this is quite dark, let me see if I can turn on one of these. One of the metaphors that's still very dark, sometimes used for the church, and our leadership of young people, leadership within the church, is of a leaking bucket. You'll be aware of these statistics where the church is declining and we're in a downward spiral and it's inevitable. The church will be, I think the first time I read this, the church will be non-existent in the UK by 1990 or something like that was the first set of statistics I ever said. But this idea that we're losing people out of churches, and so sometimes what we do in ministry is try to plug some of those gaps. Try to slow down that decline. So if we've got 20 young people, if we've still got 18 next year, yeah, we're doing okay. If we've got 100 people in our church, if we've still got 18, 10 years, we'll be doing okay. And it's this thing about, well, why are we worrying about keeping as many as possible? Because that still ultimately leads to extinction, doesn't it? So what can we do that will grow the church rather than leading it decline? And there is quite an intimate relationship between what I'm going to talk about today and evangelism. And I'll make those links really obvious later on. But I just want to kind of say that at the moment. And some of you might remember these kind of statistics around. Do you remember what the R number was?
Duplicating or replicating.
Replicating, yeah, the reproduction number of the virus. And the idea being, we're looking for a number less than 1. If we keep it 1, then I get the virus, I give it to you, you give it to somebody else, and we keep it at a static level. If the number goes up to 2, I give it to 2 of you. 2 of you will give it to 2 others, that's 4. They'll give it to 2 others, that's 16, and it goes through the roof. And if it goes lower, I give it to 5 of you, and 4 of you might pass it on, and the virus starts to disappear. Our church is in an R number of 0. Whatever at the moment. Our young youth groups, as a massive generalisation, have got declining R numbers. So what can we do about it? So there is that link between evangelism and, as you see, leadership. So, what I would like you to do, just to kind of get your heads into this space from wherever you've just come from, is with somebody around about you, ideally somebody you're not on the leadership team with, because you'll know a little bit of each other's story, unless you don't, in which case it might be a useful thing. How did you come into leadership? Share a little bit of that story for a couple of minutes. And was there might not be, was there one key event, person, book, teaching, whatever experience that was really significant in that journey? Does that make sense? What was your journey into leadership, and was there anything significant that helped you along that journey? Okay, so 4 or 5 minutes to chat with people around about if you're happy to do that. Great. Okay. So let's just see if there are any kind of common themes or consensus that came across those stories that you've told and heard over the last little minute. Who wants to boldly start with a very brief few words? What were the things that brought you into leadership?
My church ran out of adults to do the Sunday school.
Desperation. You're under 50, you're a woman, you'll do.
Yeah, I was 14.
14, yeah. Excellent, great. Thank you, desperation.
Just being put on a rota, just like you sort of start doing something and then your name gets put on more rotas.
Amazing.
And then
The inability to say no.
That's really abusive, isn't it? Yeah, okay, great. I'll be put on a rota.
I can tell a little story if you like.
Please.
I've swapped sectors, so I've heaps of experience with looked after children, fostering, therapeutic care, and all sorts of things. And the pandemic whooped my world big time. And the churches are growing, actually, and there is money in the churches. So I've just taken a full-time post in one church, which is really, really exciting and quite purposeful, which is just the opposite story. I know nothing, because I've come over from other sectors, so I'm just going, wow, the whole thing. But it's a different story.
Great. So there's something there about transferable skills. You know, quite often, you still be teachers who did children's youth right nowadays. Many teachers are so knackered they don't have time to do anything else. But yes, transferable skills. I've learned how to do this. I wonder if that might be useful somewhere else. You're absolutely right about jobs at the moment. There's lots of them. Other stories.
Yeah, our ministers just kept asking me to do different things.
Yeah.
I'm a local preacher, youth leader in different youth groups. They just keep asking, and I struggle to say no, like again and again. So it's just, you know, I'll get it done.
Yeah. So there was desperation on the one hand, this is nagging on the other. But also, I might turn that story a little bit. There's a little bit of being developed into things across different roles, perhaps, and I'll put more positive skills in my nagging starting point on that. Good. Yeah. So the minister seeing something in you that you can do this, whereas quite often I think I can. Yeah. Good.
I did used to be a teacher, but I was coming to the end of a contract and I had a phone call, and I was part-time, so I'd not got a lot of money left, knew my job was ending, nothing else lined up, phone call about something else, and they mentioned, do you know that we advertise for jobs on our website? And it was a Christian organisation. So, and I had a look, and there was my job. So it was it felt very much like, that's, God had opened that door, and kind of, so give it a push.
I'm glad somebody talked about God and opening doors. But there is that thing about, I could do that. Perhaps something I hadn't thought of before, but I could do that. I recognise in me that this is my character and skills and experience and all the rest of it. So yeah, we had somebody in the church I grew up in, and his view about calling, how do you know if you're called to something? He said, well, I could do it, I've got time to do it, so why shouldn't I do it? Which I thought was interesting, which is not even the story. But yeah, great. Anything else?
One of the things that came up is how we personally, our story, from the past,
Right.
where people have affected us, and
Yeah.
so that we bring that into.
Great. How many of your, are you all youth leaders, I'm guessing at this? Youth leaders, youth, children?
And children.
Children.
All of them, all of them.
Everything, yeah,
Schools
and
like that.
everything else. Yeah, okay. So quite often people go into youth work or youth ministry, it's because of their youth worker or their youth minister when they were young, because of what they did to me. It's kind of like I'm paying that forward a little bit. And that would be a bit of my story at that time. Anything else that's not been said in this? Okay. Just from a couple of things. One of you, how many of you are employed full or part time in your role? How many of you are volunteers? And is there anything else? Isn't there already? Okay. Right, let me tell you a little bit about my story then. So I was brought up in the church, so I've always been around that kind of culture. When I was a young child, top end of primary school, I was sent off by my parents to Scripture Union holidays every summer, SU camps it was in Scotland. And I used to go every year to that, and as you become 16 in that system, you kind of automatically become a leader, which I think is amazing. But so I was in a camp of 13 to 18 year olds. I'm 16, 17, therefore I must be a leader this year, which I think is interesting. And I might come back to that a little bit. And as part of that, there was one of the activity camps I went in. We did hill walking. That's on a mountain, obviously, and being kind of given a little bit of responsibility in that process. Was kind of I was one of the young people, and I quite enjoyed it. Never been in the hills before in my life, but quite enjoyed it. So the guy who was leading that kind of gave me a little bit of responsibility. And then that moved on to other outdoor sports, and I got involved with SU in Scotland. Used to have a canoe training programme where they would kind of develop people who were interested in it, send them away, get them trained up, then they'd lead canoeing at camps the next summer or summers after that. So that was kind of through SU. And then my local church, I was kind of sort of part of worship groups where people heard I played guitar, so I get drawn into that and drawn into that process. And it means I had a reason to go to church, which is quite important when you're kind of 15, 16, 17, because that's the age where you're allowed to go with your parents. So if it's something to do there, it makes you more likely to do it. So I was gradually brought into worship bands and eventually over time into worship leading as well. And then the last part of that journey, which sounds a little bit like yours, I'm going to give you the positive spin on what you were just saying, is that my minister in my local church started kind of getting me up front as a young person to do a little bit of preaching. I was maybe a little bit older than this lad. But when I was kind of 17-ish, he would say, why don't you go up and kind of tell us about the SU camp you've just been on? Why don't you come up the front and just kind of say what your thoughts about this passage were. Why don't you come up and tell me about something? So rather than just saying, right, lead the youth service, 1 hour, off you go, there was kind of, you've got 3 minutes, go up and tell me about SU camp. Okay? So that process of gradually having a little go at things moved me in towards that leadership journey. Whether it's through outdoor sports, whether it's through music, whether it's through kind of preaching and leading in church and so on. But actually, it was nothing to do with those activities, okay? It was Colin, my tent leader at SU camp, who saw something in me that I should go to his camp next year where I could be a young leader, okay? It was you and the hill walking guy who phoned me up in October and said, there's a bunch of guys who were at the camp, we're going hill walking on Saturday, do you want to come along, okay? And when we met, we'd start talking about how you route and all that sort of stuff. It was about Karen, the kayak coach, who brought us on and kind of developed us and pushed us forwards and found funding for all those courses and all that sort of stuff. It was about Danny. It was about Danny who played guitar and let me sit next to him quite often without being plugged in, but sit in and play along next to him. And it was about Dean's my minister who said, give me 3 minutes. It was that individual that called me into that every time. And some of those were kind of, a week in the summer. Dean's my minister, who was kind of every Sunday, he was there and he was asking after me and go around and have tea at his house and all that kind of stuff. Some of it was the short term, 1 week long. Some of it was that lifelong investment. It could have been the sound system, or cooking, or sport, or craft, or art, or whatever it was, but it was the person that was the centre of that. I got into canoeing because Karen said, we do this thing in September, do you want to come? She could have said, if I'd been expressed an interest in art, we're doing this arts project in September, do you want to come? Okay? It's the person, almost always in my experience, it's the person either nagging you until you can't say no, or recognising some gifting in you, saying, do you know, this could be your job. This could be you. It's that often that person. Of course it's God. And God's Spirit working through that person or through the job advert or whatever else it is. So for me, that personal process, relationship, ongoing relationship, is really important in that journey towards leadership. Almost much more than what you do. Although I would think it's really important for young people to be doing things in church. There's this idea, those of you who have been teachers are probably aware of this see one, do one, teach one. And the idea being here is, I'll put the example that's up here is, here's how Pythagoras theory works. Okay. Go and have a play with it, work out the area of this triangle or whatever. That's what Pythagoras says. Then you go and teach somebody else in your classroom, and by doing that, by having a go at it, and by teaching it to somebody else, it embeds it in you. You understand things more when you have to do them for others. Does that make sense? Rather than just sitting in a pulpit, sitting there listening to somebody in the pulpit telling you stuff. If you actually have to do it next Sunday morning, next Thursday evening, whenever it is you do your groups, actually you kind of do it. And that's the process of what the rabbis did in biblical times. A rabbi would sit in the temple courts, his crew, his disciples would gather around and sit at his feet and say, this is what it means in this, and then they would go off and they would have a go and they would see if they would gather some disciples round about them, and it kind of multiplied in that way. You see, we're getting back to this R number, where the school of Gamaliel or the school of whoever else or the school of Jesus multiplies and grows as different people take on that teaching. Okay? And as Karen develops kayak leaders, and as Colin gathers a network of tent leaders at SU. And that's what Jesus was doing. He was gathering them, teaching them, and moving them on. I printed everything upside down and backwards. And that leads to what some people have pulled out of Scripture. I don't know whether you've seen this, the 3:12:72 principle. Does anyone have a guess at what I might be talking about in this? Okay. So, I mentioned Jesus as a rabbi, as a teacher in the synagogues, teaching and performing signs and all that sort of stuff. And Jesus called 12 disciples. So Matthew 5 onwards, there's a process that leads up. So Matthew 5, lots of teaching, Sermon on the Mount, Kingdom of Heaven is like this. These are the Beatitudes and all that sort of stuff. Lots of teaching, how to pray. Then there was teaching on true and false prophets. Then there was teaching on wise and foolish buildings, he did lots of healing in nature miracles, so he went out and did it, and he showed them. They followed him around and saw how he did life with people. And then, Matthew 9, Jesus says to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field. Okay? Jesus called his 12 disciples to him, gave them authority. Maybe these guys have been hanging around for a couple of years with them, perhaps by now, depending on where you do it, Matthew 5. Gave them authority to drive out impure spirits, healed every disease and every sickness. Do one, teach one, do one, then, what was it? See one, thank you. So they saw Jesus doing it, they're having a go at doing it themselves, and eventually they're going to go out into all the world, to the ends of the earth, and do one. These are the names of 12 disciples. It goes through, list them all. Then Jesus sent them out with the following instructions. Don't go amongst the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. Kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Shall we all go and do that now? But this thing about where he sends them out and says, go and have a go at this. And then later, I think Mark records it slightly different way. He says, go out, and then they come back, and then Jesus says, how did you get on? Oh, it was amazing, people did this, but I really struggle with this idea. And Jesus says, that type only comes out with prayer. What? But he comes back and he says, how did you get on with it? Go and have a go. So, Jesus has the 12 that he sends out. But there's also this thing where he also has the 3, there's kind of 3 disciples. Anyone want to name them? Great, Peter, James and John. So this 3, which seem to be the kind of inner circle of the disciples in some way, which you don't quite understand. So they're the ones that went up the mountain for the transfigurations. They're the ones who were asked to look after Jesus when he was praying at night, just before he went to the temple and so on. So he's got this 3. And then there's another layer of that. There's the 72, Luke 10. The Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to go into every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, harvest is plentiful, is probably Mark's story retold perhaps. Go, I'm sending you out as lambs amongst the wolves. Go, have a go and come bring it back. So he's got the 3, he's got the 12, he's got the 72, and then there's the others, the disciples, it's sometimes called, the hangers-on. Thousands of them seem to hang around him as well. And the point here is that Jesus didn't disciple everyone. You know, he stood on a mountainside and spoke to 5,000 of them and gave them lunch and all that sort of stuff. Then there were 72 people who hung around him and got access to more teaching, and there were 12 who were the kind of the inner circle that he explained some of the parables to. And then there were these 3 he took into the kind of the most intimate moments, really, of what he was teaching. And I think it's a challenge for us, where we've got a youth group with 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, whatever size your youth groups are, your children's groups are, your ministries are, where we feel we've got to grow that, get more people into the church, we've got to grow our youth groups, we've got to get more people coming to Messy Church. And as we get more and more, we lose control of the relationships within that. Does that make sense? Jesus didn't disciple 5,000. He did some inner teaching with 72. He walked around life doing something with the 12 and then with the 3 with these intimate moments. Karen didn't teach 2,000 people how to canoe that summer. She taught 20 kayak canoe leaders who went off and did small groups of 6. Colin didn't lead camps for the next 40 years. He discipled young leaders who would then grow up and take on that responsibility to replicate it. Let me tell you a little bit about more story, and I'll get you to have some discussion after this. So this is a group called The Edge. It's a youth group that I used to lead in my church down south. And we made a decision a number of years ago. It was kind of around the time, those of you remember, where youth congregations were quite a trendy thing. So we made the decision that we wanted to kind of, I'll not get into the intricacies of youth congregations, but step out of the normal tradition of church of bringing people into our building. We wanted to go into one of the local estates where most of the young people lived and try to reach their friends for Jesus. Okay? And so I was employed, I went to Bible college, came up, so out of Bible college, I know everything now, I know how to do this. And I built the youth ministry out of almost nothing into this kind of youth group of 12, 15 or thereabouts. And I was thinking as I was getting that, I'm starting to lose control of the relationships. I can't have 20 people around my house for tea anymore. I can't do that as easily. So there was a model called Cell Church model, which some of you will be aware of. The model where you have the centre of the church is the small group. Okay. So you have a cell group of between 6 and 12 people. When you get up to 12, you cut it in half, you get 2 6s. You grow down, you cut them in half, you get 4 6s. It's that R number going up. So that's the way we did The Edge. And I changed my view of my role in ministry from gathering crowds, attracting people into church, building numbers, to discipling 4 cell leaders, my 17, 18-year-olds. That was the main focus of my ministry, to grow young leaders. Okay? So that, at the beginning, we had 2 cell groups. One week we would meet with the young people, meet with the young leaders, 4 of them, me and another volunteer. We'd meet with them, we'd plan what we're going to do over the next little while, what we're going to do next week. Then the next week they would go and run cell groups with adults present for safeguarding and maturity and all that kind of stuff. But we were there to enable them to lead ministry. Some of them have been in the church all the way through the life, other of them have come in over the last couple of years from local high school. A real variety of people. But the absolute central core of this was to get the young people doing ministry. The young people doing mission, the young people going into their schools, because I have no idea what the life of a 14-year-old is like, but my young people do. I have no idea what it's like to try and be a Christian in school these days, but my young people do. So let's equip them to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. So that came out of a book that I read that was introduced to me at Soul Survivor conference a while back, which is the reference photo coming in at the bottom. And this talks, it's an evangelism book, so you see this link coming back between growth and evangelism and growing young leaders. But it says, it all started by Jesus calling a few men, was the language he used, to follow him. This revealed immediately the direction his evangelistic strategy would take. His concern was not with programs to reach multitudes, but with men who the multitudes would follow. It's not to grow something shiny and polished and beautiful and fun and attractive, but to grow young people who can create something that is attractive and shiny to their friends. Okay, that makes sense? And we shouldn't be expecting immediately, if we take this approach, which I'll get you to evaluate, critique, question in a moment, we shouldn't be therefore automatically expecting this suddenly to explode into, I mean, I would love to see 5,000 people come to faith in one day as they did in the day of Pentecost, but we shouldn't expect a great number to begin with, nor should we seek it or desire it. The best work is always done with a few. Better to give a year or so to one or two people who learn what it means to conquer for Christ, than to spend a lifetime with a congregation just keeping the programme going, or just keeping the building warm, or just keeping me employed, or whatever else it is. Okay, so I've spoken at you for a little while, we're at a conference, you're going to confer. What I would like you to do is, do you do anything like this already? Have a conversation about what that looks like. How could you introduce some aspects of this? Are there any problems that you see with this model, or any questions you've got about it in terms of growing young leaders into that? And then we'll come back to the practicals, hows and whys and things. So, this is probably a good 10-minute conversation, so if you want to shuffle chairs around and face each other. Do you do it? Could you be doing more of it? What's the problem with it? Why doesn't everybody do it? Tell stories. Maybe somebody's told you a story where people are doing this already, having a go at it, where it's worked well. Let's get some positive stories. Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jenny here is a chaplain at a school, as well as in a church, and the school and the church are next to each other. And instead of trying to bring the students or the young people into the church, she's thinking about moving the afternoon stuff into the school, because it's a place where children, they're confident in the school rather than going to a new building or somewhere they might not know as well. You know, like if people came here to Victoria Hall, it's a huge area downstairs. You go and you might feel really small and lost. Whereas in a school or even in a classroom, maybe a school hall, it's somewhere you know, somewhere you figure, you know, somewhere you feel comfortable. And if you're comfortable, then learning about Christ is easier than somewhere you constantly focus on yourself, somewhere where you can focus on Jesus.
Yeah, so we've had set up Children's Eucharist in school during school hours, and actually they run it. The priest just says the Eucharistic prayer. And they love doing that because they love being up on stage. So I was actually wondering if they would do it on a Sunday afternoon, because we discovered Sunday mornings that they're all doing sport or something, but things on a Sunday afternoon they're more open to. That was the thinking.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
So I would start with a small group and say, would you work with me to lead it?
Yeah. And actually young people respond really well to saying, we're thinking about doing this, would you have a go at it with me? And we'll see how it goes. I'll mention that again. So rather than launching this big shiny event that ends up being not quite shiny as you thought, I was reading the way down about that Willy Wonka event that was running. It ran saying, this is going to be brilliant, it will transform your life. Actually, let's get a little group of people together and say, if we were going to do this, where is the right place? You know, having those conversations.
What would you want it to look like?
What would you want it to look like? How would you want to be involved? You know, do you want to dress up? Do you want to dress down? There's a church in Ilkley. I don't know if it's still the same, but a really high Anglican church. The core of their church ministry is around choral music. A beautiful thing to go and attend. And they've got their morning Eucharist has dozens of young people in the children's choir. And I went and I was at it visiting a while ago, and you saw all these little choir boys and choir girls processing down the aisle, and the roughs and everything. And as they went past, you got little glimpses of football socks and even somebody in their kind of Astro boots. And it's because they moved that service, because the young people were going off to sport on Sunday morning. Well, let's shift this forward so you can come to us, and then you're out the door by 9:15, you know, you can get to the football field. And there's 30 young people in that choir at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. What's that all about? That doesn't work, does it? But they spoke to the families and to the children and say, we realise this is a challenge for you, what do you want to do? So great, that conversation with the young people really. Any other good stories, interesting stories.
I think one of the difficulties is that if you're working with teenagers, they get to 18,
Yeah.
they go off someone else, you don't necessarily see the results. So what you're doing is developing skills and attitudes rather than developing actual leaders for your organisation.
Yeah, and so you have to have that kind of kingdom mentality rather than empire mentality. It's a challenge. For those of us who are in churches where young people go off to university, and I know that's not everyone's situation. That was certainly our situation, which is why I picked 16 to 18-year-olds, because they're gone. But actually the stories we started coming back from is that a year later they're on the CU exec, and 2 years after that they're taking a year out with Youth for Christ, and 4 years after that they're working for a church. So of the times I was there, I think we had 8 young people were involved in the leadership. I would say 6 of them are still involved in church leadership. Church leadership, not just in church, but church leadership, which is, I sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet, and I don't mean that, but we have equipped 6 churches with young people who are equipped and trained and experienced in ministry. So you're right, and it is a constant cycle. So in our model, we had 2 upper 6 formers, and we always brought in 2 lower 6 formers, so there was a kind of succession process built into the system. So we're working with, we're identifying the 15, 16-year-olds who are going to grow into it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's constantly starting again.
I think the other thing I've been thinking about is what Gareth spoke about the one, the small thing. And we were, what was that phrase that you used about the wave?
Surf in the wave.
Surf in the wave, yeah. Sometimes, like, there's a teenager that has helped on sound, because that's really needed, and she loved it and studied it. But, sometimes she's asleep.
Yeah.
So it's not a permanent thing, but you catch where somebody is for that moment sometimes. Not for building up
Yes.
a long-term ministry, but you work with somebody where they are.
Yeah. Absolutely. And don't be afraid of that moving on to something else
Yeah.
as well. There's something else I was thinking about when you were saying it. Okay, I remember coming back to it.
Okay.
You're right. So that short time it may move on. I think one of the things I'm aware of, and we sometimes talk about these kind of models, is, well, what about those who aren't leaders? We identified 4 cell leaders. What about the other 10? Are they not good enough to be leaders? Am I working with my favourites? And you have to kind of manage that. So we might have some who are leading a cell group. We might have others who are setting up the tech. Or we might have others who are in another little group planning a night out bowling or whatever else. So it is finding the gifts, spiritual gifts, practical spiritual gifts in people for that time.
So how little would you go? I've come into a post in May. I'm not local, so I can tell you a little bit. There's been a little bit of a drop-off. My oldest kids are 13, and I've lost a number, or they've gone on to do that football, the cricket, the stuff, in that older age group. Now, you're talking, and I've got faces coming to my mind of these people who would identify themselves as, holding deep thought, or great organisation, or good energy and musical ability. There's heaps I could put fingers on.
Yeah.
The guy who I would ask to lead worship is 7.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's a little Hong Konger who plays the piano like I have never heard before, and he leads worship really beautifully as long as I'm on the piano still with him.
Great.
Because essentially I sing in his ear and he plays something fabulous out loud, and he can play something harmonised just from a single melody, which is really astonishing. What I worry about is that if I sit and wait for these kids to grow into what is society recognises as leaders, 16, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, that's 10 years away from my buddy. That he's a proper monkey when he hasn't got a piano under his feet. He really does not know where to put himself.
Yeah.
To the point where I think he'd answer a question better with a piano than he would with his mouth.
Yeah.
And you know, how do we grow these young people? Bearing in mind that the team that I've walked into are so drained, and that they've gone from tiny local church to massive. We can't recruit Hong Konger parents to support or families to support because the Hong Kong government are not giving us the DBS checks. So we've got the only way we can do that is to we're in a right twirler, and I'm looking at these kids and I'm watching them step back because they're not at the age where we might hand them something.
Yeah, there's kind of multiple issues within that question, and I'm sure most of you are recognising. So the starting point was how little, I think. By that do you mean how young?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So those of you who've worked in primary schools, did you have kind of school leaders, school chaplains, actually there is a primary school peer chaplaincy project in the North East. In primary schools we'll quite often have team leaders, community leaders, group leaders. So that's your kind of 10-year-old, 11-year-olds would be doing that. I've got no problem with putting a 10-year-old into leadership. I'm not going to say, right, you go and lead the Sunday, the holiday club and come back and let me know how it goes. But, you know, leading worship, that's brilliant. Talking about some of those of you who use godly play, that encourages the thinking and the spiritual teaching of the young people at whatever age you're working with. That doesn't mean that they might go on later and can you tell a story next week perhaps? You've done this a couple of times, maybe you could tell a story next time because you did it when you were 5 and you were 6. Maybe now that you're 8, maybe you could do it. So I wouldn't put a limit on that. I don't think I would say you're now the leader of the Sunday school, but you know, if it's worship leading, then let them lead worship. If they enjoy serving cups of tea, then if it's safe to do that, then get them serving cups of tea. If they're interested in what do you want to talk about what it means to believe in Jesus when you're at school, then let's fill the teaching plan around them. I wouldn't put a limit on that.
Can I just share a little story?
Yeah, please.
So there's a couple of girls at our church who help lead the actions from the front when we have our family worship song. And a few times we sort of suggested, would you like to do it by yourselves? No, that's fine to say. And then this summer we had our holiday club. We'd just about got enough team to do it all. Did the first day, second day I woke up, leading the holiday club, and then I tested positive for COVID and I wasn't there. And the two girls were the two people there who knew all of the actions, and she was 10, she's now 11, and one was 12, is now 13. And so they led, so every time of worship that they had that week, they led all the other children, which was wonderful. And so they're a little bit older than 7, but yeah.
I think sitting alongside that, it's a great metaphor. You know, it was a physical thing that actually happened. It's a great metaphor of standing alongside the kids who are leading. You do the next one. I'm just going to go and get this thing ready. I'll be straight back. You know, there's those kind of little steps in, isn't it? Rather than saying, right, go for it. Good luck. And so the other thing I wanted to mention is, on top of that, is that it's really important to remember that you are the one in charge. Not in charge. You are the one who has responsibility. Okay. So when they make a right mess of it, it's my fault. Okay. And I'm 100% going to back them up. Okay. 100% my fault. I'm really sorry that happened. I'll work on how we can stop it. I'm not going to sit still. Sorry.
So when I'm chaplain, we have a representative from each year, the worship leaders. So they go down to 5, and they do, and with other people would want to help out with leading worship. So even the little ones do something. And actually I decided I was going to stop worrying about. I always say, can you speak up?
Yeah. You used that phrase about what society expects, and I think that's part of our role as children and youth workers.
I decided I wasn't going to pick people I knew would be good at it. If you want to do it, they'll get you on.
Yeah, great. I think there is a societal change, because the other thing that happens, and I saw some of my 18-year-olds, having been leading a ministry for a year, 2 years, 3 years, they went into another church and they were told to sit down and shut up until they were old enough and male enough to be a deacon. You know? So there is something about as a prophetic role of changing society in that. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to push on. Problems. Does anyone kind of mention some kind of 2-3 word problems?
So many.
Yeah, that's 2 words. So many.
So to nutshell it,
Yeah.
we've got enough kids and enough intention from the children. We're really struggling for those adults who will take
Volunteers.
responsibility.
Yeah, that's going to be everybody's story, isn't it? Yeah. So the only thing I can say to that is we know what you mean. We know what you're going through. The other thing I would say to it is that we made the decision at the start of the age that we weren't going to run the youth group every week. We run it 1 week and then we work with the leaders the next week, because that is youth ministry. Me sitting down with those 4 young people, or us sitting down with those 4 young people, that's the core of our youth ministry. And then we'll get everyone back in the next week, okay? Don't be afraid to take the first Friday of the month off, or the first Friday of term off for team training with your 15-year-olds, okay? Think about what that looks like. We don't have to be delivering the thing every Friday night, okay? What is the right thing that's right for your ministry? Are there other adults who can come and be present, even if they're not DVS checked? Any other very quick problems?
When you've got somebody who is, just to go very quickly, but always wanting to be up front and dominates.
Yeah.
And then those that are quieter, they'll
Yeah.
get looking.
So we do some teaching about team around that, what it means to be team, and that. Actually, I wonder if you could help them growing, maybe do something like that. Some very quick hows, and these are kind of sentences rather than. Come on. Okay, I might have to read these. There we go. Right. Mentoring, that's kind of what I'm implying. I'm getting that 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-4 small groups working with it. Go and visit other groups. That's a brilliant piece of youth work or children's work. Go and see somebody else's messy church or how somebody else does their youth group. That was really important for us as we grew and changed. Take them to leadership conferences. There's a great conference in Sheffield called Joined Up. Bring your young people to it next year. This place should be full of our 15 to 20-year-olds, or even younger perhaps. Okay. Leadership, learning styles, love languages. Remember that not everyone is like you. Think about what does it mean to engage with God, using the principle of godly play, using the outdoor stuff, conversational, relational, all these different love languages. The way I relate to God is not the same as you relate to God. I remember leading worship and there was a guy, a really tall guy right up the front, at the back, just stood there like this. And it's because music wasn't his thing. Oh, I did realise later on that he had written one of the songs that I was playing. And then the last thing is to have a go and create a culture where it's okay to fail. That's really important. Our ministries are not shiny, beautiful things. Our ministry are people relating to God. Okay. And then the other thing I have to mention is the whole thing around Mike Pilavachi mentoring. Some of you will be aware of that. And also doing youth work from homes. We need to be wise. Our safeguarding needs to be 100% robust in this. Lots of people have pulled out of one-to-one mentoring. Don't pull out of it, just work out how to do it safely. Okay? Speak to your safeguarding officers about how you can do that, what that looks like, how you can do ministry in your homes if that's the best way to do it, or in church or in the cafe or whatever it looks like. But be really strong on your safeguarding. If you don't know what I'm talking about, speak to your safeguarding officer and ask them what you should do. The last thing I just want to say is I work for a college where we train youth and children's ministers. Across the country, the number of people coming into these courses is dive bombing, as it is with people coming to our churches. Where are people being called into ministry? Is it maybe my role to identify the 14-year-old I'm working with, the 7-year-old I'm working with, and see what the right path for them might be going into? It is lunchtime, as my belly is telling me. Thank you. We'll listen to the call and give the call to people. Maybe God is calling you into this thing. Okay? And I'll just close with a brilliant little photo that I found of the little child following the lion. So let me pray for you, God, as you are the lion, the powerful God who goes before us. And we are these little babies, just naively following along behind. Give us wisdom, give us your Holy Spirit to see with your eyes the people, young people, children you work with, and what you're calling them into. Thank you, Jesus, for the call you had on our lives. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for that rush finish at the end. My belly was telling me it's lunchtime.